subscribe to the channel. If you want the latest and greatest, sub in.
Welcome back to the Hip Hop Report. We are back, and actually we got some music that we have to discuss before the weekend, which is always a great feeling because most artists kind of tend to play by the rules of the game and release their projects on Friday. But we're going to do something a little bit different today. We are listening to Kenny Mason's brand new project, Bulldawg. If you're not familiar with Kenny Mason, then you must not be familiar with us. We've been discussing Kenny Mason for a couple years now, even when we weren't being super consistent with the channel. And you know, as one of the acclaimed new artists from Atlanta, some would even go as far as to say that he is the next big thing coming out of hip hop in general, not just Atlanta. But as we've discussed, the idea that Atlanta has these very progressive, dynamic, and lyrical artists just brewing in the underground, ready to go. You know, with that being J.I.D., Jid, Kenny Mason, as well as Nick Grant, who's dropping this Friday, you know, with his new project, Smile, you have to think to yourself, wow, Atlanta music and Southern rap in general has evolved so much throughout the years to get an artist like Kenny Mason to even be at the forefront of what people consider next. With that being said, let's get right into it. Bulldawg. That's D-A-W-G, like Top Dog. And we start with a record named Bull Killer. So let's check that out. Once again, this is the Hip Hop Report. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, whichever of those you prefer, or none of them. Personally, it is what it is. If you choose to support, that's great. If you choose to not support, not so great, but you're welcome to be here anyways. Let's get to it. Oh, with the beat switch. This is a big thing that's been going on in hip hop in the recent years is, of course, people having beat switches in the middle of records just to kind of change up the mood, keep the audience guessing, keep you on your toes, you know what I mean? Just make sure you're paying attention. And this beat is no different. On the album's opener, Bull Killer, you really see Kenny set the tone for the project. What his mind state, not just of this album, but currently in his career, where he's at in the position that he's at, and where he's trying to take it moving forward. And you know, as far as hearing a new young artist sound this hungry on an intro record, it definitely sets the tone for the rumors that this is the next big thing, not just out of Atlanta, but in hip hop in general. And then number two, the recent single Bounce With Me, which, I mean, to me, I already talked to you about that record, and I think it's crazy, it's catchy, it's exactly the kind of sound that Kenny has been, you know, slowly but surely cultivating to create kind of his own vibe, his own direction, his own energy with his music. And I think Bounce With Me covers that perfectly.
Don't hit me with excuses, I need that.
While in Door Swangin', he really tends to kind of compare and contrast the old life to the new life, to the potential return to the old life, and whether street politics and business industry politics, does he want to go full into the business? Does he still want to tiptoe in and out of the street game? Or does he want to fully commit to music and make this his true one calling? And ironically, we never even get a beat on this record. This is pretty much just a loop and him carrying basically the load of the record with just melodic and just the storytelling that Kenny Mason does, where, you know, he creates these very visual landscapes of lyricism and allows you to see his picture without necessarily having it every song to be this perfect ensemble of instrumentation and like the standard regular. This is more of an interlude of it, if anything else. You know, I was curious if we were gonna get some grungy Kenny Mason on this project, and sure enough, our first curveball of the project lands at number 4 with What You Wanna Say, where he kind of takes this grungy rock kind of direction on the instrumental, but still is able to deliver a catchy and infectious hook and just ask, you know, what you want to say. Now, there's a lot of conversations that we have within this, you know, industry, within these reviews, these album reviews, when we go over music, when we discuss music, or we discuss artists and their ability or inability or willingness or unwillingness to discuss real life things. And within that, you get a line like this. Ooh,
I know my role in this more victim rest like.
So he's saying my role in this is more Vic. That's Michael Vick. That's an Atlanta reference. More Vic than victim. He's saying I'm more likely to be called the bad guy, to be somebody that they point and say, we got to take this guy out, than the one that's a victim of some sort of situation. Now, that has a lot of layers, both societal and in the concept of hip hop and what hip hop represents. And I like the wordplay on that, more Vic than victim. I talk with conviction. I think that those three lines specifically really give us an idea of Kenny Mason's ability to not just make good records, but also rap with some specific details and the ability to put together words in multi-syllables. This is something that traditionally and historically the South wasn't considered lyrical. And so to have this very young artist that is just getting his wheels turning and considered one of the next up and coming talents in the industry is exciting. It's exciting to have a young kid from Atlanta that represents what he represents come out and actually be spitting in this way. And this is why when we talked about Test Me with Jid, I compared him to T.I. because this flow right here is something that we didn't really hear prior to those years of T.I. delivering the trap music sound. I already know what sound I'm using. Sit go on the hook. Give me my check.
Give me my shit. Hold up. Give me my shit. I want that shit.
Hey, when the fuck am I not in my bag is what he's asking. You know what I mean? I'm Here to Stay, interlude, a record that starts like an interlude, but really as the beat builds and the progression of the record develops, it really sounds like a full record. To me, this is not just one of his most laid-back records on here, but because it really matches his tonality of his voice, it seems like one of the most complete records that we've heard so far. We're only on track 8 out of 15 records, so, we'll keep on rolling. But as of right now, Here to Stay is definitely one of my favorites so far because it tends to slow down the tempo. Now, so far what we've added to the playlist is Bounce With Me, What You Want to Say, and Here to Stay because I like the concept, I like the record, I like the fact that when you see interlude, you're not expecting a full record, and what you're getting is a full record, and I think that's dope. Test Me with Jid. Now, when we do these reviews, I do like to go over records we've already listened to because I think more listens allow for more perspective and a different take or a different look of that same concept. So we've already gotten standard hip hop Kenny Mason. We've already gotten grungy, rocky kind of Kenny Mason. We even got no drums under my rhyme scheme Kenny Mason. Now we're here to hear sinister Test Me If You Wanna Kenny Mason featuring Jid. And what I really want to tap into is the lyrics. We've already heard the record. If you guys been keeping up, if you guys follow the channel, you've already heard this. You know what's going on. But this particular record, again, a whole new experience in this album at track 9. See, this is where I kind of hear some of the Kendrick influence where if you just add that effect of what Kenny does on his records, then you get, or you take that off, then you get what Kenny's doing here. I mean, dog, this whole verse by Jid and this rhyme scheme and these different tonalities that he's hitting, I even heard some Tupac in that. I mean, just like really impressive, man. And it becomes almost obscene because we're used to him and this skill set. So it's like even when we hear a verse like this, if we're used to hearing Jid, we don't even think much of it, but it's still incredible. You still have to give it its flowers, even though you've given these flowers to him before. All right, we're back to grungy Kenny Mason with Be What I Want featuring Paris, Texas. A relatively light album in regards to features, in regards to who he's having on here. He's carrying most of the load, not just in totality of the project, but also in the hooks and the choruses and things like that. And I think that's really what makes him stand out among other artists right now, that where a lot of artists will go and feature an artist and kind of like get that assist to elevate things they can't do. He tends to want to carry the biggest load off the project, and that's commendable. So by track 11, we're full grunge. We are all the way in Kenny Mason Goes to Rock era. And again, this is the era that I almost felt that, you know, Kendrick, K-Dot, was leaning towards, you know, maybe a little bit grungier, maybe a little bit more transferring. So he was able to kind of take his message and cross over to a broader audience. This is what a lot of people, especially haters, would say that it's selling out or trying to appeal to a different demographic, where I see him trying to convey his message to a larger audience, more importantly, a white audience, if we're being specific, that needs to hear this message of struggle and inequality. Because if they don't get the message, then what good is that gonna do in the vacuum? I digress. Black Fit. Damn. That record was crazy. And I feel like this whole back end, after we hit number 9, after 9, we really went into full grunge mode. I mean, even Be What I Want, it's probably the last sonically hip-hop friendly record that I've heard so far. So we'll see how we finish off with 13, 14, and 7, 11, number 15. I almost feel like this part of the album is mixed differently almost. And maybe it's just that his voice cuts through the rock grunge sound a little bit better. But to me, all of these records on the back end sound considerably stronger, mixed better, and his voice is just way more, it's way warmer within the record. That's the Gucci Man flow right there. All right, number 14, Find God, featuring Dominic Fike, who we also just saw on the Isaiah Rashad album, It's Been Awful. Again, letting me know we're on the right page when we talk about Kenny Mason doing a record with Isaiah Rashad. I also said Tierra Thomas should be in that same scope of artists that should work together, but you know, I don't control these things. You know, I can only suggest greatness. Now, Find God with Dominic Fike, you see Kenny Mason kind of almost wrestling with the idea of, you know, what he wants to be. And he wants to be real. He wants to be himself. He wants to make music that inspires him and inspires others like him. But in the same span of this, in the industry, in his reality of where he's at currently, he sees a lot of fake things, a lot of people trying to be things that they are not. And thus is somewhat disgusted with that. But he knows that his route to success is to stay focused on what's right and do what is him unapologetically, no less. Ooh, I don't keep in touch because it's probably that I feel away. Man, how many times in situations, relationships, friendships, whatever, you have people that you could easily reach out to and say, hey, this is what it is. Can we squash this? Can we move forward? But, you know, as somebody who's created a lot of those issues and tried to resolve a lot of those issues, I can tell you it's really hard to go back to square one. You know, once we've had fallout with somebody or issue with somebody, man, it's almost impossible to get back to that same authentic exchange of time, of energy, of care, you know? And it sucks, you know, whether that's a friendship or a actual romantic relationship, it's a really hard thing to do, to have conflict and still surpass that conflict to get back to square one.
That you gave me acceptance, I don't need it really.
7-Eleven ends the album Bulldawg in a beautiful set of analogies, metaphors, and similes in which he literally ends and says, now that I have your acceptance, I don't really need it. You know, we spend so much time trying to be what people want us to be, what people expect us to be, what we think we should be to be successful. And then when we actually get to that point, we realize, oh, this isn't even what I want anyways. This isn't fulfilling me in a way that I thought I would be fulfilled. And then thus we struggle. We struggle with the idea of these things because, you know, at the end of the day, we want these things to complete us, to fulfill us, to make us feel whole, like we don't need to pursue anything else. But that's rarely the case. There's always more to attain. And within this, within 15 records, I think Kenny Mason does a good job of not just telling us his story so far, but telling us his story as today, where he's at. And you see him already struggling and dealing with issues of the industry, of the fakeness, of, the politics of it. And, business as usual, you know what I mean? Or politics as usual, as they say. But with that being said, at 15 records in, we have some really great records on here, and I try to pick out a few of them that were showcase his diversity, his ability to create different kind of records. So we added Bounce With Me, What You Want to Say, Here to Stay, Test Me With Jid, Black Fit, as well as Find God. Now, are these all the records that I think are great on this album? No. But I think those particular records are the ones that really stood out to me as dynamically different and engaging in a way that I felt could tell the story even beyond that and bring people back into the album as a whole to hear the whole thing. Because there's so many different sounds on this project that, you really can't help but to ask yourself, who is Kenny Mason?
Music taste, these are the breaks. ATL for the win. We bring you that real without any other fakes. You know it gets hotter in May, so what more can we say? Subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the channel. If you want the latest and greatest, do it for the game. Subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the channel. If you want the latest and greatest, do it for the game. Music, taste.